Welcome to the Retirement Made Easy podcast, a show created to be your go-to source for straightforward retirement advice. Best of all, it is presented in a language that you can understand. Are you ready for some straight talk on retirement planning without all the fluff? Well, you found the right podcast. Here's your host, certified financial planner, Greg Gonzalez.
Hey, welcome to another episode of the Retirement Made Easy podcast. I'm Greg Gonzalez. Thanks for joining me today. On this episode, I wanted to talk about the announcement of the cost of living adjustment for Social Security starting in January of 2025 and what that's going to be. And we'll even spend a couple of minutes talking about the history of inflation and cost of living adjustments to Social Security checks. So we'll talk about the facts when it comes to cost of living adjustments. We'll talk about maybe even a little bit of my opinion and what to expect in the future. And then we're also going to talk about the Medicare Part B premium for those people that are on Medicare while collecting their Social Security benefits. That Medicare Part B comes right out of their check, as most people know. So we'll talk about that. We're still waiting on what the cost is going to be for 2025. That announcement hasn't come yet. But more than anything, I want to talk about Social Security income when it comes to your overall retirement planning. And I think a lot of people, when they're putting together a retirement plan, they have too much of an emphasis on Social Security income and not enough emphasis on other sources of income like personal savings, maybe it's employment income. Because as we've mentioned so many times on this podcast, retirement planning, a lot of it is about income planning, cash flow planning. Hey, where's the money coming from now that maybe our paycheck is not what it used to be? Do we have enough income coming in to live comfortably in retirement? So hopefully this is a fun discussion today, and there's a lot that you can take away as you're doing your own planning. If you're a new listener to the podcast, I invite you to check out our website, retirementmadeeasypodcast.com. You can listen to all 170 plus episodes right there. You can submit your questions to the podcast because we answer those. Probably every other month, we'll do an episode on listener questions, and we're happy to answer those. Or if you would like to have a response that's private, you can certainly send in your message and request that. Additionally, there's free resources you can download. We will be uploading some new ones that we're working on right now for 2025. So keep checking back and looking for those. Those are free. And for those people out there that are wanting to partner with a retirement planner, someone that specializes in working with people 55 and older as they plan for a successful retirement, there's a link at the top that says Work with Greg, and there's a form that you can fill out, and we'll get in contact with you that way. All right, let's jump into today's topic. Social Security cost of living adjustments. What are these? How do they work? Well, every October, the Social Security Administration will announce what the cost of living adjustment or inflation adjustment will be for the following year. And so just a couple of weeks ago here, they announced for 2025 that it's going to be 2.5%. Now, for some people, they're going to get more than 2.5%. And for other people, they're going to get less than 2.5%. What do I mean by this? Well, if someone is working while collecting their Social Security benefit, and again, there's income limits you need to be aware of if you're under full retirement age while collecting your Social Security check and working. But setting that aside, let's imagine that someone is working while receiving their Social Security benefit check, and their earnings in 2024 were one of their top 35 working years, because just because you're collecting a Social Security check, if you're working, you're still paying into Social Security. So as long as your earnings for 2024 were one of your best 35 working years, well, that's going to impact your Social Security check for the following year. So that would get readjusted. And in that situation, you would actually not only get the cost of living adjustment, but you would get a bump up because of your earnings history for 2024. And then I also said, well, you could be getting less than 2.5%. And some of you out there would be saying, what does he mean? If they come out and say, hey, the cost of living adjustment for Social Security is 2.5%, and my Social Security monthly check in 2024 was $2,000 a month, then come January, I should be getting a raise of 2.5%. So that's an extra $50 a month. You would then get $2,050 a month. And what I want to say is, hold up, wait a minute, because if you're on Medicare and your Medicare Part B premium comes out of your Social Security check every month, well, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services will announce what the Medicare Part B premium will be starting in 2025 later on this year. And we don't know what that is. They're projecting it's going to be a 5.9% increase. In other words, it's going to go from about $174, $175 a month to $185 per month starting in 2025. So what that will do essentially for those people is, instead of getting a true 2.5% raise with inflation, it will be reduced by the increase in the Medicare Part B premium. So you may end up with, let's say, a 2.3 or a 2.2% raise, depending on your monthly Social Security check. Obviously, the bigger it is, the less the Medicare Part B raise will impact you. But what we can do is, and we'll put this in the show notes, if you just Google Social Security cost of living history, and there'll be a link in the show notes that you can click on and you can see this chart. This particular chart goes from 1975 through 2024, and you can see year by year what the historical raises you would have got if you were receiving a Social Security check. Now, the past 30 years, it's been about 2.4%. That's the average. Now, some years there was no cost of living adjustment, like 2015, for example, and 2009 and 2010, there was no raise. And in fact, if the Medicare Part B premium went up, your Social Security check actually went down that year. So as we're working with our clients at our firm, I guess err on the side of caution, and we try to build a retirement plan that's more conservative. And we're only expecting a 1 to 1.5% COLA for the next 30 years. We don't think it's wise to be overly optimistic as far as cost of living adjustment, because Social Security is not in the greatest shape. And I was kind of let down. These presidential candidates, and neither of them came up with a proposal or any kind of plan to fix Social Security. In fact, they didn't even talk about it. Meanwhile, it is a drastically underfunded program, and if changes are not done, as we all know, the money just isn't there to continue the way it's being paid out. So my advice is do what we do. We think it makes sense. If we're wrong and the cost of living is higher than we anticipated, well, that's just icing on the cake. But let me give you an example. We had a prospective client come to us and they had a retirement plan that was done, and their Social Security check at age 62 was $20,000 approximately. And this plan that they had us review, they wanted a second opinion on it. It had a 4% cost of living assumption for their Social Security check. So by the time they were 92, that $20,000 Social Security benefit went up 4% compounded every year. And by the time they were 92, their Social Security check had increased to $64,868 a year. Again, gone from $20,000 a year when they were 62 to $64,868 when they were 92. That's 30 years of a 4% cost of living adjustment average from Social Security. I think that is entirely too optimistic. And if you look back at the last 30 years, you didn't get a 4% cost of living adjustment from Social Security. So please, please be careful when you're trying to plan ahead where your income in retirement is going to come from. Again, what we do, we're more conservative with our assumptions, especially when it comes to something out of our control like Social Security. Now, for that same person, we said, okay, let's assume at 62, you start your benefit and it's $20,000 a year. What if you just assume a 1.5% raise until you're 92? Well, that $20,000 of Social Security income at age 62 turns into only $31,261 when you're 92, as opposed to their original plan, which was $64,868 a year when they're 92. Again, that's assuming a 4% cost of living for Social Security. I just don't think that's realistic. And I really, really question the wisdom in that. And on top of that, again, as we talked about, you're not getting the true cost of living adjustment. Again, you got to keep in mind that your Medicare Part B premium is a cost that comes right out of your Social Security check once you hop on Medicare. And there's a chart that I like. It looks at Medicare Part B premium for 20 years between 2002 and 2022. And what it found was, on average, the Medicare Part B premium rose almost 6% per year. So 5.9% per year, which is a lot higher during the same time period of the regular cost of living that your Social Security check went up. And in fact, just look back a couple of years, Medicare Part B premium in a single year jumped 14.5% between 2021 and 2022. And we haven't had a double-digit cost of living adjustment by inflation for Social Security checks since 1981. At that point, it went up 11.2% that year. So I think it makes sense to say, okay, our Medicare Part B premium between 2002 and 2022 went up almost 6% a year. I would expect that to continue for the next 30 years. If you're approaching retirement, let's say you're on retirement's doorstep here, I would expect the Medicare Part B premiums to continue to climb like that every year. And one thing I'll mention with Medicare Part B premiums, like I had mentioned, it's, I believe, $174, $175 a month. That's what it starts at. It's income-based. And there's an IRMA tax. We'll have a link in the show notes if you're interested. The way they calculate what you pay for a Medicare Part B premium is based on your income 2 years ago. So if you're on Medicare today at 65, they're going to look at your income in 2022. And if you were below a certain limit, well, you'll have just the regular Part B premium. And if you were above that threshold, well, that's when the IRMA tax starts to kick in, and that increases your Medicare Part B premium in stages. And a lot of our clients want to try to avoid that IRMA tax if at all possible, and just pay the regular Medicare Part B premium if at all possible. And the way to think about that is, hey, our income in 2024 is going to impact our Medicare Part B premium in 2026. So it's really like 2 years out of planning. And what I want to emphasize here on today's podcast is the cost of living adjustment on Social Security benefits is incredibly powerful. It really, really adds up when you look at approximately 30-year time period of retirement, collecting a Social Security check and getting those inflation adjustments. It can really, really add up over time. A Social Security check is an annuity check. It is a series of payments throughout your life. Social Security checks are once a month for the rest of your life. So every October, they announce what the cost of living adjustment is going to be for the following year. And while it has averaged about 2.4% the last 30 years or so, it's incremental raises that you get that add up over time. Most private pensions have no cost of living adjustment, so they're a fixed amount for the rest of your life. And with the way inflation is, the cost of living is, every year, everything we buy seems to cost more. So that fixed pension check actually buys less goods and services every year. And that's why the Social Security check is so powerful, because in my opinion, it's not going to keep up entirely with the rising cost of living or inflation, but it's going to keep up with some of it. And to give you an example, like life insurance companies offer annuities, which offer lifetime income. And that would be a fixed monthly check for the rest of your life. There's only one insurance company that has a cost of living adjustment to it that would ratchet up every year. And the way the product is designed, I've looked into it, I've studied it, it's not that great. But insurance companies are not going to offer annuities that have a cost of living that they have to pay you more and more and more every year, depending on inflation. They know that just wouldn't be profitable for them in the long run. That's my opinion, of course. My compliance department's listening to this, but that's purely my opinion. None of them do, because they would be out of business if they did. If there was an annuity company that said, hey, we'll give you X amount of dollars per month for the rest of your life, and by the way, every year, we'll give you a 3 or 4% raise depending on inflation, I mean, they would be out of business. Now, some public pensions do. You'll notice some teacher pensions, they have a cost of living adjustment that adjusts every January. If you work for, there are state and local pensions that I have reviewed over the years, and some of our clients have them, that yes, they do have a cost of living adjustment to them. And some years they're actually capped, where you'll never get more than a 5% raise in a single year. Even if inflation was 15%, the most they'll pay out is you'll get is a 5% raise. Or you stop getting raises at a certain point. Here in Missouri, our teachers' retirement pension, if you start out at $1,000 a month, throughout your life, you will get cost of living with inflation. As long as there's inflation, they calculate it every year, but it caps out at a certain point once you're at 85%. So in other words, if you start out with your Missouri teacher's pension at $1,000 a month, it will stop giving you inflation raises once you're at $1,850 a month. At that point, you will be capped out. So if you have a pension, and I know this is kind of getting off track here, but you want to kind of make sure and ask questions. Okay, what has the cost of living adjustment been historically, so you can kind of know what to expect? And they will have a historical record of, okay, this is what our pension has increased, and year by year by year for the past 20, 30, 40 years, they will be able to provide that to you. But getting back to Social Security, hopefully today's discussion has opened your eyes, maybe provided some insights that you didn't know or weren't familiar with when it comes to your Social Security check going up every year or going down. Again, it's going to depend on, is there a cost of living adjustment and how much your Medicare Part B premium went up if you're on Medicare. And here's the reality is, okay, retirement's a journey. It's not a finish line. I talk to people every day that are trying to plan for a successful retirement, either prospective clients, podcast listeners, or current clients. And one of their biggest concerns is, how am I going to keep up with the rising cost of living, or some people call it inflation, has just gotten out of control? How does my retirement income keep up with that over the years? If my costs are going up and keep going up 3, 4, 5% a year, how do I stay ahead here? And especially when your Social Security check, again, only got a 2.5% raise, where does the extra income come from? And while the market's doing okay and high today, what if it turns around, goes the other way for the next 2, 3, 4 years? Where am I going to be at that point? These are real concerns that people have. And I think it's just because inflation and the cost of living has just been so high the past several years that people have really opened their eyes and said, gosh, if this keeps up, where are we going to be at 10, 15, 20 years from now? And how do we stay ahead? And you hear these reports that say real wage growth has actually gone down in this country. What they mean by that is when you hear real wages, that's adjusted for inflation. They've actually gone down. It's just people may have got raises, but when inflation is greater than what the increase in their salary is, there's actually a decline on the purchasing power of your money. So in summary today, I want you to click on the show notes to kind of look back, okay, historically, what has the cost of living been for Social Security since 1975? Maybe look back the last 10 years. Maybe look back the last 20 years. That will give you an idea of maybe what to expect. If history is any guide, and I'll argue it's the only guide we have, don't expect a whole lot for raises to your Social Security check in retirement. I think you'll really be setting yourself up for failure in retirement. I had mentioned that woman that was 62 years old and her plan said when she was 92, she was going to be getting a check from Social Security for $64,868. And my plan, with a 1.5% Social Security raise average, she would only be getting less than half of that, $31,261 when she was 92. And you might be thinking, well, why is that troublesome? Well, it's because her plan was expecting all of this money to be coming from Social Security, when in fact that it was way too rosy, and the money would have had to come from her personal savings. And what that would do is, that's basically another $30,000 a year that would have to come out of her retirement savings. And she was going to likely run out of money with that kind of spending. So again, don't be overly optimistic. Again, this is just my personal opinion here. If you and your financial planner believe that maybe Social Security cost of living is going to be a lot higher in the future, the next 30 years, God bless you. But truly know that that is a risk, and you might want to err on the side of caution, or just look at two different scenarios. Maybe a what if scenario of what if Social Security overpromises and underdelivers the next 30 years? What would it look like? What would that do to my retirement income? I think you will really be shocked at the difference. I hope this episode of the Retirement Made Easy podcast has been helpful. Hey, check out our website, retirementmadeeasypodcast.com. If you have questions, submit them there at the very bottom. I'll see you next time. And remember, always dream big. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, please consult your attorney, tax advisor, or financial advisor prior to investing. This is a hypothetical example and is not representative of any specific investment. Your results may vary. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. All indices mentioned are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. The SmartVestor program is a directory of investment professionals. Neither Dave Ramsey nor SmartVestor are affiliates of St. Louis Retirement Advisors or LPL Financial. There is no guarantee that a diversified portfolio will enhance overall returns or outperform a non-diversified portfolio. Diversification does not protect against market risk. All investing involves risk, including loss of principal. No strategy assures success or protects against loss. Securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA, SIPC. And here's another minute of disclosures from our compliance department. Traditional IRA account owners have considerations to make before performing a Roth IRA conversion. These primarily include income tax consequences on the converted amount in the year of the conversion, withdrawal limitations from the Roth IRA, and income limitations for future contributions to a Roth IRA. In addition, if you are required to take a required minimum distribution in the year you convert, you must do so before converting to a Roth IRA. As I have said on countless episodes, this information is not intended to be a substitute for specific individualized tax advice. We suggest that you discuss your specific tax issues with a qualified tax advisor.
Thank you for listening to the show today. Check us out at our website, retirementmadeeasypodcast.com. And if you want some help from Greg, submit your questions at the bottom of the page or sign up for a 30-minute retirement coaching session with Greg. We'll see you next week.